The rain fell like accusations that October evening, each drop a reminder of everything Sarah Mitchell had lost. She sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, her coffee growing cold between trembling hands, watching the world blur through tears she refused to let fall. In 3 hours, they would turn off her daughter's life support. In 3 hours, Emma's room would go silent except for the flat, endless tone that would confirm what Sarah already knew but couldn't accept, that sometimes love isn't enough to keep the people we cherish alive. But what Sarah didn't know, as she sat there drowning in grief, was that her daughter had already given her one final gift, a gift that would take a stranger's courage to deliver. Maya Torres had been driving home from her second shift at the diner when the accident happened. She saw the headlights swerve, heard the sickening crunch of metal, watched the car flip 3 times before settling upside down in a ditch. She was the first one there, pulling a 17-year-old girl from the wreckage, holding her hand while they waited for the ambulance, whispering promises that everything would be okay even though they both knew she was lying. That was 6 days ago. 6 days of Maya visiting the ICU, sitting in the corner of Emma's room while her mother kept vigil, too raw in her own grief to notice the presence of the stranger who had held her daughter as her life slipped away. 6 days of Maya carrying a secret that grew heavier with each passing hour. She found it wedged under the passenger seat when the police finally cleared the car. A journal, leather-bound and worn, filled with Emma's looping handwriting. Maya knew she should have given it to the authorities immediately, but something made her open it, and on the very first page she found words that changed everything. If you're reading this and I'm gone, please find my mother. Please tell her I forgive her. Please tell her none of it was her fault. The pages that followed painted a picture of a girl who had been struggling with depression for years, a mother who had tried everything, and a relationship fractured by illness and misunderstanding. Emma wrote about the fight they'd had the morning of the accident, about the cruel things she'd said, about how she'd driven off in anger and immediately regretted it. She wrote about reaching for her phone to call her mother, about how love and apology had been on her lips when the truck ran the red light. But it was the final entry, written just hours before the crash, that made Maya's hands shake as she read it. Mom thinks she failed me, but she saved me every single day. She held me when the darkness got too heavy. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. She loved me even when I couldn't love myself. If something happens to me, I need her to know that she was enough. She was always enough. She was everything. Maya had kept the journal in her jacket pocket ever since, its weight pressing against her heart. She told herself she was waiting for the right moment. But the truth was simpler and more shameful. She was afraid. Afraid of intruding on grief. Afraid of making things worse. Afraid of being just another stranger offering hollow comfort. But as she walked into the hospital that evening, following the path she'd memorized over the past week, Maya realized there would never be a right moment for this kind of pain. There would only be now, and the choice to be brave enough to face it. She found Sarah exactly where she expected, in Emma's room, holding her daughter's hand, singing softly under her breath. It was a lullaby, Maya realized, the kind mothers sing to infants, and the intimacy of it made her want to turn away, but she'd come too far to retreat now. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Her voice cracked on the words. Sarah looked up, and Maya saw her trying to place the face. "You were here before." In the corner. "I thought you were a social worker, or I was the one who pulled Emma from the car." Maya stepped closer, her hand instinctively moving to the journal. "I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself properly. I'm Maya Torres. I've been coming because I needed to make sure she wasn't alone." Something shifted in Sarah's expression, a crack in the armor of grief. "You saved her." At the scene. "The paramedics said if you hadn't gotten her out when you did." "I didn't save her," Maya interrupted gently. "I wish I had, but I didn't. But I think maybe she left something for you, something that might help." She pulled out the journal, and Sarah's breath caught. "That's Emma's. She kept it in her car. I thought it was destroyed in the accident. It survived. And Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so sorry, but I read it. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. And I think Emma would want you to read it too, especially the last entry, especially now." Maya placed the journal in Sarah's free hand, the one that wasn't holding Emma's, and watched as the mother's eyes dropped to the worn leather cover. For a long moment, Sarah simply stared at it, as if afraid it might disappear. Then slowly, she opened to the bookmarked page. Maya turned to give her privacy, but Sarah's voice stopped her. "Please stay." It was barely a whisper. "Please don't leave me alone with this." So Maya stayed. She stood there while Sarah read, while tears streamed down the mother's face, while the machines beeped their steady rhythm, counting down the minutes until everything would end. She watched Sarah's expression transform from anguish to disbelief to something that looked almost like peace. "She forgave me," Sarah whispered, pressing the journal to her chest. "I thought her last memory of me was that terrible fight. I thought she died thinking I didn't love her enough. But she knew." "She knew." "She knew," Maya confirmed. "And she wanted you to know that you were enough, that you were everything." Sarah looked up at her then, really looked at her, and Maya saw recognition dawn in her eyes. "You've been coming here every day?" "Sitting with us." "With her." "I was there when she needed someone, so I stayed. It felt like the right thing to do. You're the stranger who held her hand." Sarah's voice broke. "The paramedics told me someone stayed with her, kept talking to her, wouldn't let her be scared." "That was you." Maya nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Why?" The question was raw, genuine. "You didn't know us." "You didn't owe us anything." "Because she was someone's daughter," Maya said simply. "Because she was scared. Because I would want someone to do the same for my child if I had one. Because that's what we're supposed to do. Show up for each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." The machines continued their rhythm, marking time neither of them wanted to pass. A doctor appeared in the doorway, his expression solemn, and Sarah understood what his presence meant. The 3 hours had come and gone. It was time. But Sarah stood and turned to Maya, this stranger who had become something more. "Will you stay?" "When it happens." "Will you stay with us?" "Of course," Maya said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. What happened next would stay with Maya forever. Sarah read aloud from the journal. Passages about love and forgiveness, about all the good memories Emma had cataloged between the painful ones. She told her daughter stories from when she was small, reminded her of Christmas mornings and birthday parties and ordinary Tuesdays that had been extraordinary simply because they were together. And when the doctor finally turned off the machines, when the room fell silent except for Sarah's tears, Maya held her. This stranger, this mother, this broken woman who had just lost everything, she held her while she shattered, and in doing so, began to piece herself back together. In the days that followed, Maya learned that Sarah was a nurse at a different hospital, that she'd been raising Emma alone since her husband died when Emma was 3, that she'd spent years battling insurance companies and inadequate mental health, resources to get her daughter help. She learned that Sarah was strong and fierce and capable of more love than seemed humanly possible. And Sarah learned that Maya was a single mother herself, working 2 jobs to support her 8-year-old son, that she'd spent the week visiting Emma on the few hours she had off, that she believed in showing up even when it was inconvenient, even when it hurt. 6 months later, when Maya's son needed emergency surgery and she sat alone in a different hospital cafeteria, terrified and broke and drowning in what-ifs, Sarah found her there. She sat down without asking, took Maya's hand, and said simply, "You're not alone. You're never going to be alone again." That's how it started. Not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with 2 women who understood that humanity isn't found in perfection but in presence, in showing up, in carrying each other's burdens even when your own feel too heavy to bear. Sarah helped Maya navigate the insurance nightmare and connected her with resources she didn't know existed. Maya invited Sarah to her son's soccer games, giving her a place to channel the maternal love that no longer had its intended recipient. They became family not through blood but through choice, through the kind of love that shows up in hospital waiting rooms and school pickup. Lines in ordinary moments that become extraordinary. Simply because they're shared, Emma's journal found a permanent home on Sarah's nightstand, and sometimes on the hardest days, she would read it aloud to Maya, and Maya would listen, bearing witness to a girl she'd known for only moments but who had changed her life forever. A girl who had taught her that sometimes the greatest gift we can give is simply being there, in the grief, in the joy, in the messy middle where most of life happens. People in their neighborhood began to notice the two women who seemed always together, and the story spread. The stranger who pulled a girl from a burning car and stayed for her final days. The mother who lost everything but found a way to keep loving. But those who knew them best understood the real story was simpler and more profound. It was about her, about Emma. Yes, but also about Sarah, and Maya, and every person who makes the choice to show up for another human being, when it would be easier to look away. About the truth that we are all connected by invisible threads of compassion, and that sometimes, in our darkest moments, a stranger's kindness can light the way home.